All right, so I think we have this week and next week. I'm going to try to get through chapter 8. So we're going to do probably the first half of 8 today and second half next week. So let's see if I can get these arrows to work. Ah, they worked. Okay. I'm shocked when anything works on the computer. Okay. I just have to make this point that Jesus is handed the seven-sealed scroll, and we've studied about that before. And there are different schools of interpretation, but there's definitely seven seals on here, and there's definitely one seal at a time being opened in chapter 6. And there are various interpretations and opinions about Revelation, but there's actually one particular one that is the traditional view of most Bible-believing churches. I should say churches that teach or believe prophecy. You know, a lot of churches are Bible-believing, but they don't necessarily understand Revelation. So we discussed the fact the rapture is going to happen in Revelation 4:1. John's taken to heaven. And then there's actually no time, because it looks like we're seeing this scene in time that it records in chapter 4 and 5. But in reality, there's no time because there is no time in heaven. It's kind of a paradox, right? We'll understand when we get there, but now we see us through a glass darkly. So we have an inkling, but there's no way to explain it. How can you explain the infinite when you're the finite? You know, I think it's one of those things that words can't explain. God gives us some clues, but it won't be until we get there that we actually understand what it's all about. So I believe the rapture happens at the beginning of the 7 years, and I've gone through a quite lengthy presentation about why. I believe that right off the bat, the red horse is a horrible war that kills 2 billion people. Let me put it this way. It's not that I believe it. Everybody pretty much as a Bible scholar believes the red horse is war, whatever their opinions. So also another thing I see that most Bible scholars believe is that there's a beginning, a middle, and the end of the tribulation. That is, if they understand and know prophecy. So Ezekiel 38 and 39, those two chapters are key in understanding the red horse. The rabbis in Israel say that's the next war coming. And historically, there is nothing that's ever happened that would fit into that particular scenario. So we're always teaching A, B, and C. As long as you have your time work A, B, and C, you know where things are in the plan. Cutting myself off here, but the traditional 3 serial judgments of Revelation. I say traditional, it would be a traditional interpretation by most Bible scholars who are studying these things. I also superimposed on that because it's part of this diagram. I'm not sure who made this diagram. I found it on the web, so I used it. But I superimposed my ABC concept. A is the beginning, B is the middle. You see this particular artist, put a dash there, and C is at the end. So even though this particular scenario and series of judgments is not what I believe anymore, I think you need to know that this is the way most people see it. It is problematic, though. It's always bothered me. I probably believed this for 40 years until I feel like God gave me a new illumination on it. But you can see how difficult it is. This gentleman, could be a lady, is trying to put the first 7 seals and then the trumpets and the bowls one after another, but they don't really fit. So if you study Revelation, you probably have heard of this or seen this approach. However, after the 7th seal, remember the scroll with the 7 wax seals, after the last one's open, there are no more scrolls. Jesus doesn't come into a second scenario and the angel hands him another scroll. It's the 7th seal of the scroll is over. It's over. However, I believe the Lord led me to see that there are parallels going on here. I'm going to explain that. If you want to continue believing this particular line of thought, that's fine. The trumpets and the bowls, I believe, are parallels and inside of what's already been unveiled. In other words, by the time you get to the seventh seal, these things have already happened. All judgments have happened. And I call them parallels. We're going to look at that. I believe that the trumpets are parallels to the first six seals. And the last bowls are like the judgments of Moses upon Egypt. And those judgments, according to most scholars, feel free to look it up, see what you find. Most of them, I found that the 10 judgments of Moses, probably remember the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. Turns the Nile red and have fiery ice coming down from the sky. It was a great movie, The 10 Commandments. But what we have at the very end is Armageddon. So we have the rapture at the beginning. In the middle, we're going to have the Antichrist. And even this person who made this clearly divides it, like I've been teaching, because it's the way it is. It's in the Word. And what I'd like you to think about, though, is and examine for yourself is the approach that that it has been the traditional approach. And so after the seventh seal, and we're going to look at that, then many scholars and prophecy teachers believe that kind of opens up the next set. So it's a set of 7, 7, and 7. Seals, trumpets, and bowls. And then the seventh trumpet, and likewise, it opens up the 7 bowls. The text does not state that the 7th judgment of each series introduces the next series of judgments. So it's not direct. That is assumed based upon the position of each 7th judgment in the chapter flow. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, as you go down through the chapters. The 7th seal is in Revelation 8:1. So in chapter 6, we went over the 6 seals, the 4 horsemen, the martyred souls. And then you come to the 7th trumpet, which is many, many chapters over in 11:15. And what is it? It's you got to go through all chapter 8, 9, 10. 10 is a parenthetical again. And then through half of 11, you finally get to the 7th trumpet, which in our Western mindset, we think everything should be in a Greek fashion, laid out line upon line. And God, I think because he wanted only the initiated ones to understand, and for us to have further knowledge as we go, we can delve into this and consider it further, and we'll get help from the Holy Spirit. The thinking here is that there has to be a logical, chronological series, one after the other. And to our mindset today in our culture and in America, especially, we like things to be neat and in order. And in the Hebrew mindset, which is John's mindset and all of the early church, it's different. The Hebrew mindset is different. It's an Eastern mindset, not a Western mindset. So in this way of thinking, in my theory, I'm going to call it my theory. You don't have to buy into it. It's just this is where I'm at now in my exploration of Revelation. In my thinking, based upon what I've taught before, that the first 4 seals, which are the horsemen of the apocalypse, and it's pretty much like this is going to be like horses, on the racetrack. They're right on top of each other, one horse after the other. That's what horses do. That's my interpretation. But the key is the focus is the war. In other words, Antichrist comes on the scene, tries to make a 7-year peace deal. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then we have the red horse of war that the word says kills 1/4 of the earth. Right now, I Googled AI yesterday, and we're slightly over 8 billion. So 2 billion people will perish in that war. That's why I call it World War III. Yes, sir.
But doesn't the Antichrist come first and make a deal for 7 years, but it only lasts 3.5 years apiece?
We get into that in chapter 13. Yeah, there's that's a whole maybe 2 or 3 classes on that. So, but I appreciate the thought. You're right. That's a clear division. Doesn't mean that when he comes on the scene the first time, at the beginning of the 7 years, he's a great guy. He's not going to be what people would call the Antichrist. He is, but nobody knows it. But that's a whole different topic right now, but it's a good thought. So the red horse is going to bring about World War III, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. And the black horse, the resulting economic collapse, and pale horse death. I believe that the third judgments are parallels. And you might say, oh, well, where else would we find a parallel? The theological word is synoptic. Syn means same, optic means sight or view, same view. So if you hear that term anywhere else theologically, they'd be talking about Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Those are called the synoptic gospels. Because even though each one gives you a slightly different picture, they're all stating the same thing. There is no discrepancy there. If you think there's a discrepancy, it's because you don't realize that these are 3 different viewpoints and vantage points. Each of them brings their own uniqueness to through the Holy Spirit, of course, to write down what happened. So I believe these are synoptics. And I guess when I was younger, I'd read this, and I can't be the only one. I'd look at that and say 1/3 of the trees and grass destroyed. And I'm going, okay, this is how God's going to do it. I'm going to go to the forest. Okay, this guy here, I'm going to put an X, whatever the loggers put on a tree. Skip this guy, another X. And I'm going, I know I've heard people teach this. So I'm going, something's out of tilt here. You know, it's not right. And so I've come to realize that this is a true statement. All the words true, but I believe I've derived the meaning of it especially based upon the red horse World War III. But I report, you decide. And I'm going to dig a little bit further into what I mentioned in chapter 6 for the red horse. We established, I know everybody wasn't at that session, but we established then, you can always go back and listen to it in the video, but we established then that in Ezekiel 38 and 39, there's going to be a war at the beginning of the 7 years, and that the main player there would be Russia, the old USSR, most of it, and the 5 nations who are all Islamic that it mentions, coming down against Israel in the latter days. That latter days is a reference to the tribulation period. So this is what I believe the Lord showed me, and you can take it or leave it, but think about it. When I looked at the rough land square footage of the United States, all our allies, and we have quite a few, and the land mass of Russia and all her allies, it comes to approximately 1/3 of the surface of the Earth. So, if my theory is correct that the war of the Red Horse is World War III, then who are the big players right now? Every week I'm reading, I'm not saying it's happening now, but every week I'm reading something. Even this last week, Putin came out and said he has nukes and he's going to use them if NATO goes further into Ukraine. Is this going to be it? I don't know. But it's something to think about. Really, in this context, especially, is that who are still the only 2 adversaries from the old Cold War? It's the United States and Russia. And all the missiles we have and all the missiles they have, the warheads, are pointed at the same cities. They never change. 1989, the wall came down, but their military and ours still are targeting all of the Russian and American cities. You can look, don't take my word for it, just look it up. But so, not much has changed. We're living in a kind of a fool's paradise, thinking that, as it says in Ezekiel 39, and those who dwell carelessly in the isles. And I established, I believe, that the isles would have been in this time, 2,500 years ago, that which was out further into the Atlantic, maybe Atlantis, legends of that, but they didn't know what was out there. They just said the isles or the islands. I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in security. That translation says it that way. Another translation might say something like, who are careless. And I called us, because I think it's talking about us. I call us the careless coast dwellers or islands. Isles is really what the word is in the Greek there. So 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and he discovered an isle. He didn't know what he had discovered, but as explorers kept on going to North America, they found out we were a continent. So the word couldn't have used the continent or America. God couldn't use that because it makes no sense to a man 2,500 years ago. So, as I've said before, what would happen in the United States if all the believers disappeared tomorrow? What kind of country would we have? I don't like what we have now. I grew up in Miami a long time ago. We didn't lock the doors on our cars. We didn't lock our car doors nor the house doors. Anybody just walk in anytime, and kids, we did. We just walked into everybody's house all the time. And you go, that's not in Miami? Yes, sir. That was Miami. That's where I grew up. If anybody says, oh, nothing's changed, I got news for you, folks. Go on down there. I still have some good friends, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, but I'm just saying, that's not the old Miami I knew. But at any rate, so what could happen here is that Russia and the USA go at it over the Middle East. And people have been saying this since I was studying prophecy 50 years ago. Of course, they said USSR. And it never happened, of course, so people dismissed all that. But the time wasn't right. It's in God's timing. And I'm not saying God is causing all this. My own theory is that God is saying to the world of unbelievers, go at it. It's all yours. You take care of your own little world. It's actually Satan's world. So we'll see about that. So if this is true, then in the United States and USA finally go at it when we all leave, then that's what's going to happen. There are many believers here. There's many believers in Russia and many believers in all of the allies of each side. So, but they'll all be gone. How can God nuke Russia and the United States? We're so great. We're so wonderful. There's so many Christians. Well, he can do it because there are no Christians. His judgment, Jesus in Matthew 24 gives us two vivid illustrations that most people miss. He said, because the disciples had asked him, how do we know the signs? When are these going to be? And after Matthew 24 finishes the prophecy, then he gives us a little hint. And I believe the hint is clear, but you have to digest it for yourself. It will be as the days of Lot. So what happened with Lot? He sent angels there. They grabbed the people and forcibly took them out of the town. You would think, oh, they go like, okay, which you guys have been good. You've been doing good stuff. No, they were God's people because they had the genetics of Abraham. And because of God's covenant, he had to keep them safe. And he forcibly took them out. They had no say in it. So take that as you will. The other thing is Noah. Most people don't think about it this way. Noah preached for 120 years. The world was pretty much like it is today, as in the days of Noah. But if you think about it this way, Noah and his family were in the ark and they went above and out of the judgment. The judgment never touched them. So Jesus himself gave us the two examples for what I'm saying. I believe it's true. The rapture has to occur before these things occur because Jesus said, by those two parables or examples, they're not really parables, they're real incidents, that the righteous will be protected And in Revelation 3:10, it says, behold, I will keep you from the hour of trial that's coming on. Actually, the word there is thalepsis, it's tribulation, the hour of tribulation. So hour can be used as a general time. Now, they didn't have watches, by the way. What time is it? Okay, Peter, it's 11:41. No, it didn't work like that. They couldn't even tell you what hour it was. They could only tell you in 3-hour stretches. It's dawn, mid-morning, noon, mid-afternoon, evening. That's, and in the evening actually also was divided. So the time telling of that day was very crude. Anyway, so to move on, let's look at the trumpets to see if it might be accurate. And trumpets are starting here after seventh seal. That's a mystery to me too, because the seventh seal should have been back at the end of chapter 6. Chapter 6 is seal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you have this parenthetical 7, where God's focusing on two aspects. And then out of the blue again, we get trumpets come in, but first the seventh seal. When he broke the seventh seal, this is Jesus opening that scroll. There is silence in heaven for about half an hour. Well, that's a conundrum right there. There is no time in heaven. So how can there be a half an hour? I don't have the answer. I don't know why God put it that way. There is no, keep in mind, timelessness is of heaven. Heaven is of timelessness. We also say eternal, forever and ever. But God sees the past from the beginning to, from the beginning to the end. So there is no time there. But this is interesting. You can dig all you want to. There's never been silence in heaven at any time. Yeah, it's only constant praise. So my understanding of that is that now we're going to go look at a different synoptic view of what's happening in Earth. And that this is to emphasize that this is like the last moment before Jesus and the rest of us riding our horses come back to Armageddon. So this is the reason there's silence is because after 2,000 years, he's coming back. And after 6,000 years of sinful mankind and a fallen planet, he's coming back, which is worthy of total silence and thought, Sometimes people will say, oh, let's have a silent moment of prayer. Whatever the reason, that's what the word says. I believe it. Do I understand it all? No.
What does the Greek say for half an hour? How does that work?
It is media ora. Might not be media, but it's the same word. I think that's Latin. But anyway, so it's half, literally the word which means half. Like take a board and cut it in half. And then ora, H-O-R-A, which means hour. But then again, hour, but see, that's the problem. We can't think like we do today. They had none of these guys had wristwatches. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't even have a sundial. Maybe the rich Roman guy in his garden had a sundial. But, he didn't have his slaves bringing it everywhere he went. Oh, Maximus Cludius, what time is it now? Yes, master. The sundial says it's half past the ant. What ant? He's crawling on the sundial. Enough humor, no humor. And so after that trumpet is finished, we see that John accurately records what's happening. These are visions. I believe he's actually seen it in there, but we'll call them visions. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and the 7 trumpets were given to them. Okay, so I can see how people might think after the 7 seals that, they'd come in and now we have 7 trumpets, but I'm going to show you that I believe they're parallel. And another angel came and stood at the altar holding a golden censer. It's an incense burner. And as much incense was given to him, and he might add it to the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. Remember, the altar in heaven is like the old altar in the temple. The temple supposed to mirror what was actually in heaven. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hands. So our prayers are always like sweet smelling incense to God, and they're continually going up. And the angel took the censer, and he filled it with fire of the altar and threw it to the earth. And there followed peals of thunder, sounds, flashes of lightning, and earthquake, which is pretty much what you see in other places where we are privileged to see the throne room of God. These are the type of things that are occurring. So you can see that in Revelation chapter 4 and in Ezekiel chapter 1, but that's not our topic. Moving on. Trumpets 1 and 2. So that was an intro I was just reading. So we're in chapter 8, Revelation, and we're going to go to trumpet 1 and 2. And the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared them to sound. So you can see all the angels, they got the trumpets. I don't know what kind of trumpets, probably those long single barrel deals, you know. It's not a barrel. What do you call it? It's not a barrel. I don't know. It's a tube, right? Kind of like a tube. Okay. The first sounded, and there came hail, fire mixed with blood. Boy, that sounds a lot like somebody who was in the Ten Commandments movie. Okay. Yeah. I remember the scene where the Pharaoh's out on his porch and he's got all his great and mighty men, and all of a sudden the hail starts coming down. It hits the ground and it becomes flame. It's quite an illustration. And this mixture was thrown to the earth. So it's emanating from heaven, but it's going to be deposited on the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And so we always had that constant conundrum. A third. What does a third mean? Again, I think it means a third of the land masses of the two players in the seven seals focused on the first four, which are the horsemen of the apocalypse, World War III. And the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. I've listened to this fellow. I just highlighted it. If you get the slides, you can go see it yourself. But Tom Horn wrote many prophetic books, and I think he was overall a pretty good prophetic teacher. And he deals with something that's coming in a few years called Apophis, or Apophis, probably the right pronunciation. He did a Sid Roth show. If you want to see what he has to say about it, but take yourself back 2,500, well, in this case, 1,900 years ago, to John on the Isle of Patmos, first century man, and he sees in this vision. It's the only thing, I guess he thought the biggest solid object he could think about was a mountain. Kind of makes sense, right? I mean, he was off of Asia Minor, and of course he'd been to Greece, Greek cities and all around. And so he's seen a volcano and he's seen giant mountains. He may have, lived kind of in a place in Israel where there weren't a lot of big mountains. But then again, I'm thinking of, what's that one that's snow-capped, Mount Hebron? I think it is. Heron? Anybody know? I think so. I got a mental blank. But anyway, it's this huge mountain. I think it's right near Jordan and Syria meet up there. But yeah, so he would have always seen that. So that is a very big mountain. It reminds me of the mountain that we saw out west, Mount Shasta. I don't know if you've ever been in California, but you're driving, this huge thing starts coming up in your windshield. And there's nothing around it. It's just this gigantic mountain in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And so first time I saw, I was amazed. But I think, he's very familiar with these things. But he obviously was not an astronomer. He was not an astrophysicist. He's just writing down faithfully what God showed him. So what could be this great mountain with fire? Okay, well, it could be very well be an asteroid. And as we have watched, we watched the launch. When was that launch? A week ago, I guess. The launch of the Falcon 9, and it was in the early evening, so the light was really good. And you could see it as it, and I like to watch these, you could see from our position 30 miles away, this huge like Roman candle coming down. You can't see the rocket itself, but it looks like there's something there, this like a mountain with fire, and it's shooting fire out of its tail. You could kind of imagine that. So I think, this is the other way. It's not going up, it's coming down. So he sees this thing coming down, and I'm sure as it hits the atmosphere, it has a fiery trail, just like the Falcon of the space shuttle. So a third of the sea became blood. So wherever it lands, we don't know where it's going to land. Assuming it is real, I think it's going to be a real object. Then wherever it lands, it's going to cause havoc in the ocean. Could be a tsunami for all we know. They've made 2 or 3 movies now, I think about. The last one is Don't Look Up. Has anybody saw that one? Yeah, well, they're all wiped out by a tsunami. So there's nothing about a tsunami here. I'm just saying, if something that big lands in the ocean, it doesn't take a genius to know there's going to be a tsunami. That's the way it works. So at any rate, a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. A third of the ships were destroyed. Again, I don't think he's going, okay, aircraft carrier, sink you. Okay, frigate, leave you. Submarine, leave you. Oh, here's another battleship, sink you. That's not how God does things. It's going to be in the waters surrounding us, Russia, and all of our allies, which are all over the world. Both of us have allies all over the world. So as we move in, the third angel sounds. And if you bear with me, I'll try to get through. Oh boy, I'm not going to make it, am I? Too much material. Third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, and it looked like a torch. Again, that's what when I saw the launch the other day. If you're a primitive man looking at that, how would you say, "Oh, I saw this fire going up, and it looked like a torch"? Of course, in that visage, the person in the first century might say it looked like an upside down torch, because that's what it looks like. And the name of the star is Wormwood. And the third, by the way, the word star is aster. It's where we get asteroid from. But as far as I know, the Greeks didn't have the word asteroid. Astronomers made that up later. Oi just means a little star, because it looks like when it's coming through the atmosphere, like it's a star, but it's a little one. It's not like the sun. Many men are going to die, and this one's going to pollute all the waters. So all the waters in the third of the world are going to be undrinkable and bitter. Very well could mean bitterness there, could mean radiation poisoning. Because I don't, how else would someone describe it? It might be they're bitter. I mean, it's probably they're nasty anyway you look at it. Fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, a third of the moon, a third of the stars were split. So the third of them might be darkened, and the day might not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. Okay, so what have they talked about? Well, I mean, we don't even have to imagine this. If this is true, there's going to be an interchange between the nuclear ballistic missiles. What happens if all that debris goes up into, just like take Mount St. Helens, and even they've had one in Iceland and in some other places recently. Airplanes got to go around it. They can't go through it. And the people underneath it can't see the sun or the moon. It's all blocked out. So I would say that in my theory that this means that that everywhere there is this horrible World War III devastation, and especially in those locations, there's going to be so much debris in the atmosphere you won't see the sun or the moon. I think you call that nuclear winter. But from the word here, I don't believe the whole planet's not going to be involved. But that's my theory. And I looked, I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a sound, with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound." That's going toward the end of chapter 8. It's kind of hard to remember, but if you could, the 3 woes are the last 3 trumpets. So trumpet 5 is the first woe, trumpet 6 the second woe, trumpet 7 the third woe. I think God did it that way and we'll read and look into that, because those 3 happen at the end of the tribulation. I should say in the Great Tribulation, the 3.5 years. So Are they woes? Yeah, if woe is the worst thing that can happen, they are woes. And just to go a little further, I just want us to look at our current 4 power blocks in the world. It's us, the EU, Russia, and China. So if you go and look all the news you want, look at the news today, in case you're not aware of it. There's only 2 superpowers. Russia is really a third world country with nukes. We'll call them a superpower. There is the EU, which is our ally, and Putin is totally trying to intimidate them because they have all our nukes. And the kings of the East, China, who, like the Asian people, are so smart, so cunning, so patient. We don't have patience over here. They have a plan, they lay it out, and they're doing it step by step. They're building, everything they have is new aircraft carriers, new submarines, new missiles. I was just listening to a retired general who was saying our army, we really don't even, we're not up to date. China has all new stuff and they're outpacing us, and that they are on schedule to become the dominant economic power by 2030, and they will have a bigger, I think they already have more ships, a bigger naval fleet than we do. Doesn't mean they have the best, but they're constantly building the building, and we're watching it. And if anybody's ever looked at World War II, you'll see what happened. Hitler, after 1917, in the armistice, he was not Hitler. I mean, he was there, but the German leaders, they agreed not to arm ever again. That was part of the treaty. And even the French general, the head of all the French World War I forces, made a prediction. He says, "We have punished these Germans too hard." I'm paraphrasing. In 20 years, we're going to have a new war, a big one, worse than this. You can look that up. I can't remember his name right off the top. But so all that's to say, Hitler started building up the military, and Chamberlain and the rest of them said, no, don't do that. Be good. Don't do that. And they did nothing about it. And finally, all the way to the very end, Chamberlain, the British prime minister, went over, shook Hitler's hand, and said, "Peace in our time. Hitler has assured me he's not going to take over any countries." Well, that's what our government's doing right now. And I mean all the government, not just one party. So the whole thing's in cahoots, from what I say. But if they aren't, I'm making a point that this buildup, we've seen it before. It's called World War II. But this time we have nukes. So when you have the buildup of all these countries and players, we need to realize the word has already stated what's going to happen. We don't need to be fearful. Next time I'm going to discuss why World War III and Armageddon are totally different. They're not even close to the same thing. World War III happens in the beginning. Armageddon happens at the very end. But I want to give you all these reasons. And then we're going to look at events that happened in the middle of the tribulation. We're going to look at the 5th seal and 5th trumpet, and then we're going to move on. And so we got quite a bit to cover there. But right now, I think we'll close with prayer. Anybody wants to stay and ask questions, that's great. Honey?